And welcome to tonight's ARG UK seminar, Conserving Amphibians and Reptiles in South Africa. It's something somewhat different tonight, catering for the more global audience that we've attracted to the online seminar series lately. My name's Peter Gillatt, and I'm the chair of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Amphibian and Reptile Group, or HIWARG as we generally known. And as you can probably hear from my accent, my origins are way further south on the tip of Africa, but I've been in the UK now since 2007. My own herpetological interest started during my primary school years when I started finding little snakes around the local fishing pond. And I was fortunate to be able to spend years growing up on a small farm that my family had in the Northwest Province, and started finding and catching snakes from around the age of 10. And as you can see from the image I'm showing there, it really is a very sort of rural area, such as much of Southern Africa is. Miles and miles and miles of open space to wander around and basically just have fun times outdoors looking for things and finding things. Boarding school then was in the foothills of the Drakensberg in KwaZulu-Natal. And the school premises always had a good number of snakes and other critters somewhere around. And it was there that this was the early 80s, a large snake pit. And you can see the snake pit there is next to the hockey fields and next to the rugby fields and what have you. And using that, I and a number of other friends at school would go off into the mountains and the hills and the surrounding area, as you can see there, catch and collect things and bring them back and put them in the snake pit. And we would use them during parents' days and sports days to try and infuse people coming to the school about the various species in the area. One does need to remember that this was around 40 odd years ago, and the way things are done now, very, very different to the way things were done back there. So I've drifted in and out of actively doing herp-related stuff over the years, but I've always maintained an interest. Unfortunately, I never joined any organizations while I was in South Africa, which is a regret of mine. But my interest has predominantly always been snakes more than the rest of the herps. When I came over to the UK, I continued looking for them, but it was really quite challenging until I adapted my approach to finding them in the colder climates. And then I linked up with UK organizations, and happy to say that is where I am now, still out surveying and trying to find the animals, still trying to infuse people about them. And the picture that I'm showing there at the moment, that was back in the early 80s, and this one over here is roughly 35 years later, almost the same pose, doing virtually the same thing, just trying to get the message across to people about how wonderful these animals are. I am, however, still involved in the South African herp scene, specifically regarding snakes. Southern Africa has a huge number of herps. From a snakes alone perspective, there are around 180 different species in the Southern African region. South Africa itself has around 120 odd species of snake. I say roughly because the science is evolving, and as we had in the UK, where the grass snake subspecies was elevated to full species, the same kind of thing is happening in South Africa. And so the number of species and subspecies and discoveries through DNA and what have you is ongoing, and there's some really exciting stuff going on down there. Of those 180 species in Southern Africa, roughly 70 are non-venomous, roughly 50 have got a mild venom, which would do effectively nothing to a human if bitten. There are roughly 30 species which would give a very painful bite with some significant discomfort. And I guess similar to the European adder, that would be the equation. And then out of the 180, there are 20 species that potentially may be lethal. However, in the Southern African context, fortunately, antivenom production is very good. The antivenoms are very good. The medical treatment is generally a lot better than it is in many of the other developing parts of the world. So death by snake bite in South Africa and the Southern African region is relatively low compared to many of the other areas where they are facing vastly, significantly more challenges. So aside from snakes, as I mentioned, huge number of other herps. Frogs and toads, lizards alone account for roughly 350 different species across 50 genera. Here we're talking things like agamas, chameleons, monitors, lacertids, worm lizards, geckos, caudalids, and then you've still got the terrapins, the tortoises, and even turtles offshore. And I'm sure Fortunate, who you'll be hearing from shortly, would be able to give you some numbers related to the different species of amphibians. So that the Southern African area is huge. When you look at it on a map context, the map distorts it and you don't really get a proper feel for it. But the terrains, the habitat, the climate is all extremely varied. And while some of the species are really widespread, many of the species are constrained by their natural requirements. And these are areas that are very often under threat of development and sheer human numbers. The Kruger National Park, an area that most people are probably familiar with, by way of size, is just a little piece of South Africa. Compare that to something in the UK, and the Kruger National Park covers approximately the same area as Wales. And in that area, there are over 50 different species of snake alone. So as with many developing areas, the region has some significant challenges as far as conservation is concerned. And I think even more so when we're talking about the unloved species. Things like rhinos, elephants, whales, wild dogs, they all get really great media. The herps, not so much. Inevitably, when you see something herp related in the media, it's probably going to be something negative where somebody's been bitten or there's been a disaster. And again, what we talking in the Southern African context here now, but it's probably much the same as what we see in the UK. When we do see herps in the media here, it's usually when someone's managed to get themselves bitten by an adder. So by virtue of the fact that it is a developing area, development and human needs overarchingly take precedent in terms of the needs and the provisions that are going on there. And as a result, changing people's perceptions about the animals plays a massive role towards conservation. Unlike what we do here in the UK, we're not talking about going out and doing weekend habitat management sessions. That kind of thing does not take place in the Southern African context. There are vast fears, largely driven by lack of knowledge and many local and indigenous myths that need to be overcome, and overcome in a sensitive way. Telling somebody that their belief about a snake is ridiculous, you're never going to win them over. You need to work with the people. It's a big part of what Fortunate is involved in. Coupled to that, there's a very real danger that some of the species do pose, because many of the most venomous species have adapted very, very well to living in and around human dwellings. And to this end, social media now plays a key role in being able to reach people. We've got a Facebook group. Many of you will be aware. I talk about it over here often enough. Snakes of Southern Africa, owned by African Snakebite Institute. And That group alone has almost 180,000 members. The growth projections for this, the way it's been growing over the years, show that it could reach 250,000 people by the end of the upcoming summer, the UK winter. And that group focuses solely on snakes at the tip of Africa. Never mind the amphibian groups and the frog groups and the other reptile groups talking about chameleons. Where, that's 180,000 people just on a snake group. When you add to that a number of other groups and pages, I've pulled up a couple over here. Johan Marais' African Snakebite Institute page is over 140,000 followers. Nick's own pages, the ones that I looked at, were over 50,000 followers. There's other specialists, Tyrone Ping, Arno Nordia, and a number of others. And all these groups are working to get the message across, and people are really interested in what message they are getting across about herps in that particular region. So you can add to that all the face-to-face activities that go on to reach people. Snake handling and removal courses that ASI hosts. And I know that some of tonight's seminar attendees living in the UK have attended some of those courses when they visited South Africa. We've got online training courses via the ASI website, available to people all around the world who might have an interest in herpetofauna in the region. There's a downloadable app, hugely popular app, which contains identification and details of all the species and even contact details for snake rescuers in your immediate area. And it always amazes me how I can sit here in the UK, thousands of miles away, and I can see somebody post a picture of a snake in their garden. Within seconds, it'll be identified. Instructions can be given to the person, and within 15 minutes, I can have somebody at their house capturing and relocating that animal safely. That's a brilliant example of social media used correctly. And then if we further add to that, there are the activities such as which we're going to hear about from Nick and Fortunate shortly. And all in all, we're talking almost 1 million people, one way or another, being reached in that Southern African area in some way to improve their perceptions and understanding about the animals themselves. And that is just some amazing outreach. So in tonight's session, we're going to hear from 2 of the people engaged in those face-to-face activities, what they're doing, and how their work is benefiting herpetological conservation in South Africa. If you are interested in more information, links to the various groups or people, or even if you're planning a visit eventually, post-COVID, please, a visit to South Africa and you'd like some first-hand training, you're welcome to contact me and I'll put you in touch with the various people that can help. And I would obviously encourage anybody who's interested in supporting the work that these people are doing, admittedly in very challenging conditions, to please reach out and offer such assistance as you might be able to. Without doubt, it will be most appreciated. So I'm going to wrap up there. I think that kind of bundles things into a little bit of the context. The important stuff is our speakers tonight. So I'm going to hand over to Fortunate, who's a board member and a project director for Youth for African Wildlife. He's going to talk to us about some of the stuff that he's involved in. And then we'll hear from Nick, who's a snake rescuer in SA with something of a speciality, both of whom are authors in the herpetological field as well. And then with any luck, we will have a bit of time to wrap up with some Q&A. So I draw a line under my piece there. Fortunate, I'll hand over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Peter, thank you for the introduction, and thanks to you and Angela for the invite to your seminar series. Just to add to Peter's introduction, in addition to youth, work and wildlife, I am also busy with my PhD studies, currently my third year, and the focus is on the cultural side of conservation and the scientific side of conservation of frogs and reptiles. I think what I'm going to do, because my internet is unreliable for the most part, I'm going to switch off my video stream. I'm pretty sure no one is going to miss my not so pretty face. And I'll switch it back on once I'm done with this presentation so that we have a higher chance of things going smoothly.
I'm sure that'll be fine. Fortunate, yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right, so involving people in conservation of South Africa's frogs and reptiles. This counts towards my PhD portfolio, hence there are 3 other names next to mine who are my research supervisors, and these are all my affiliations. So a bit of background, I am a member of a research group that mostly does scientific conservation. We have ecologists, we have taxonomists, and we have parasitologists. We needed a meaningful way to get to the public. And when I say meaningful, I mean not developing something in isolation, not developing something on the university premises and just shipping it off and hoping people jump onto it. The experience I gained while with Youth for African Wildlife helped with the planning of this outreach, helped me think through this outreach. So now what Youth for African Wildlife does is, to put it shortly, we make conservation cool using social media, camera technology, and eco safaris or conservation safaris, where you go on safari, but half of your safari is contributing to conservation. But the thing with Youth for African Wildlife is that we focus on the large, charismatic, or as Peter said, they're lovable animals, mostly the big mammals. But the principles from Youth for African Wildlife are transferable. Some of them are transferable to frogs and reptiles. And some of the lessons that I learned from Youth for African Wildlife include that each social media post impression is an opportunity for outreach. So the screenshot over here is of a post that I shared, and a lot of people, 1,765 to be exact, saw that post, regardless of whether they interacted with it, but they did see it, and each and every person that saw that for a second or so was a chance for me to interact with them and share the conservation message with them. And for that second, there's another type of impression where we say first impressions count. And this is true also for social media, because for that 1 second that a person is scrolling through their phone and they see what you shared, if you have good quality social media, multimedia, they're more likely to stop scrolling and interact with what you shared and read the conservation message that you're putting across. And if you can get away with multimedia that is not of good quality, but it's engaging. To give you an example, videos of the different movements of frogs that frogs use usually get a lot of shares, usually get a lot of interaction, even though they're really bad quality. And the reason is that they're engaging. People are used to seeing frogs jump as they move. But if you share a video of one of the microhelids, maybe burrowing or even walking, and people start to engage, and it's very interesting, and they start asking questions like, why is this frog walking? Why is it not jumping? Then you have a chance of outreach to say that not all frogs are good jumpers. Another important thing from South and Wildlife is that you need to mind your language. Don't dumb it down. If you dumb things down, then it means your audience is essentially dumb. But what you should do is make it relatable, just in the same way that when you write a scientific article, there's 5 pages worth of instructions of how you should write that scientific article. It's making it relatable to scientists. But when you're not communicating to scientists, make it relatable to them. And still keep the science of that message you're sharing, but make it relatable to their circumstances. So at Youth of Wildlife, I'm in charge of teaching conservation education. This is mostly to primary school kids. Sometimes we have the teachers of the primary school kids joining along, which is what's happening in this picture. And from that, I've learned that asking the audience's opinions, curiosities, inhibitions, just simply going to the audience and saying, I wanna teach you about something, but how do you want to learn? And which part of what I'm teaching do you want to learn? How this came about was actually I went to the primary school kids, excuse me, and asked what they wanted to learn. They said everything. Mind you, we were in a nature reserve, so I thought that was a really bad question to ask. But then again, I thought maybe it's an opportunity to teach these kids how they want to learn. So they said everything. I said, okay, let's jump onto the safari vehicle and let's just drive. And if you see something interesting, point out, and I'll share some knowledge with you, and we'll continue from that. So with this picture, I found a shell of a leopard tortoise, and from this shell came lessons about skeletal adaptations, came a lesson about the different types of reptiles that we have, and also because there were signs that this tortoise was killed by fire, there were lessons about how fire can be used as a conservation tool, and even though it's a conservation tool, it still has some casualties like this tortoise shell that I found. So using those principles that I learned from Youth African Wildlife, and with the help of my co-supervisors at the time, we set out a pilot. This pilot was going to be used for outreach for our research group. This is outside Youth African Wildlife now. This is the scientific community saying they want to reach out to people that are not scientists. So the aims of this pilot were to test whether the general public wanted to learn about frogs. We were focusing on frogs only, and if the people liked it, we would move on to snakes as well. Second aim is basically, is it worth our while researching frogs and reptiles and people at the same time? And if aims 1 and 2 are met, then we can expand the project. So this pilot was conducted in a very small part of South Africa. It's small in size, but it's actually the amphibian diversity hotspot in our country. We currently have 132 species, and in that province alone, there are over 74. And in that small corner that I highlighted yellow there, I think at the time of the study, there were 54 species that we found in that small area of South Africa. So we got participants from 5 different regions within that study area, and the reason for the 5 different regions was that it's people from different parts of this region, and although they spoke the same language, they spoke different dialects, and they experienced different types of frogs. So we had a workshop, which is what's happening here. So in that workshop, we wanted to know, do the locals want to learn about frogs? The answer was yes, because they were already there and they were interacting with us, and they enjoyed what we were sharing with them. We asked about their curiosities and how they want to learn about frogs. We asked them to share about their cultural knowledge, and in return, we said we would give you how science sees your cultural knowledge. So this asking about cultural knowledge is a way of dispelling myths without saying no, you're wrong. It's just seeing if there is any science behind the cultural knowledge that they use, and their inhibitions. Why are frogs hated so much? That helps us also put a scientific perspective to things like why are frogs cooler to touch than human skin, and after that, excuse me, people start to understand that no, frogs are only cooler because they maintain their body temperatures lower than what we do. So as people start to understand frog biology, they start to be more comfortable about frogs. This particular guy, when we started, he wouldn't touch any frogs. But once he understood that the watchy skin had nothing to do with human-related infections, and watchy skin was actually glands that the frogs used for defense, he became comfortable with the frogs. He was taking selfies with the frogs, and you can see here, I think it looks like he's shaking hands with his new buddy. And some participants became more appreciative of frogs. Not so much this lady, because she was still a bit skeptical, but this guy in the red shirt. I chose this picture because this guy, to this day, the study happened in 2016, 2017, and to this day, this guy, whenever I go to the study area, he volunteers to be my assistant, and every once in a while, I still see him sharing pictures of frogs on social media and using the local names that we discussed in the workshop. So after the workshop, there was a ton of data that we collected, and it took a few months to process, and the results show that this pilot achieved all of its aims. So aim one was that there is public interest in learning about frogs. Then aim two, it is worth researching people and herpetofauna at the same time. Now, all these publications I'm showing you were accepted with minor revisions, and when I first wrote some of them, I thought, oh, this is going to get rejected, but no, we had some really good reception for these publications. The book in particular was an overwhelming success. Now, this book is a double-sided book, hence I'm showing two different colors. So if you flip it, it's Zulu. If you flip it again, it's English. So with this book, it was only meant for that small corner of South Africa, that one province of South Africa, but the book ended up being ordered in 8 of the 9 provinces that we have in the country. And I've also received orders from Belgium. Some books were sent to the UK, some books made it to the US, some even made it to Canada. And besides the orders that were unexpected, this book from when it was published in 2017 to this year, there has been some sort of award or accolade that has been in my name, but what it was happening is actually the award was meant for the book, but because the book is not a person, they gave the award to the first author. And there's a second nomination for this year for another award relating to this book. So based on the success that we had, we decided to expand the project. Expanding the project meant that it would be a PhD project with multiple peer-reviewed publications, and there would be non-scientific outputs that would continue past this PhD research, because it's something that's really close to my heart, and I don't want it just to be something that I show to my supervisors or my reviewers. I need to have it continue way past my academic career even. So with aim 1, this is the title of the PhD project. Again, biocultural diversity is just studying biodiversity and cultural diversity at the same time, and how it relates to frogs of South Africa, and seeing if there's any way this relationship can be used to have policy, conservation policy that is more socially inclusive than it is now. So basically having conservation that considers people and wildlife equally. New aim 2, is there another book? Yes, but I don't know what the book is called. I don't know how big the book is going to be. There might even be 2 books, one on frogs and one on reptiles. But what I do know for sure is that this book will be in all the 9 indigenous languages of South Africa, and it'll be freely available to schools mostly, and people that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, the current book has been distributed to over 100 primary schools in South Africa, freely distributed. And for me, that is the highlight of having this book, is just dropping it off at school and seeing the reaction on the kids' faces when they look at this book and it's in their home language. Another output that's going to continue way past the PhD is wildlife in vernacular. These are the 9 languages, 9 indigenous languages that this website is going to focus on. Now, the aim of the website is to basically share wildlife knowledge in people's home languages. So again, this website doubles as a data collection tool for my frog and reptile studies, but it also is an information dissemination tool for just animals in general. It's still in its infancy, but what is happening now, I'm just working on Big 5 posters, Pete's Lovable Animals, and having them in people's languages, and just seeing how people react from that. And if the reception is good, then I can start introducing posters of frogs and reptiles in all the local languages. There's an output that I just can't quantify. I can't even put this in any thesis or in any publication, but there's always a ton of gratitude. Excuse the quality of the pictures. These pictures were not taken by me. This is books that I couriered to some of the schools, and in return, some of the learners send me WhatsApp messages to say thank you for the books. And I just keep these pictures on file, because this just warms my heart. I wasn't expecting to get any of this. Some schools are more formal with their gratitude. They sent nicely worded letters, and yeah, like I said, it's something just you can't quantify, but it's something I always look forward to. So with gratitude, that's how I end my talk. Thank you to to everyone that's involved. Thank you to all these people that have contributed funding in some sort of way to this work that I'm doing. Best way to explain my work is that it started with a crazy idea. And when I had this crazy idea, there were a bunch of people behind me saying, no, we like your crazy idea, go ahead with it. And with that, I say thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Fortunate that was absolutely. I'm just going to get my movie and whatever. I think I've got my camera going again. I think that was really fantastic. I'm just going to share back to a screen over here again for a second. With any luck, I'm going to do that correctly. So that should be sharing with, if I'm lucky, it's sharing now the front page of the HIWARG website, what we call our little mini web. And so much of what Fortunate was talking about there really, it resonates with me from a personal perspective. When I look at our HIWARG group, our motto, our reason for being as such, we've got that conservation through empathy by engagement. And that was something that came up right at the start when we were talking about getting the group going and what's the background, what's going to drive us. And to me, that is something that is a real driver. You can show people pictures and you can talk to people about things, but there's just no way that actually having an animal and letting people experience that actual engagement. When we have public events and we put up our gazebo and we have a few toads and frogs and maybe a grass snake there, and people come along and they look at this and they look at these animals and they experience them and they say, been living in the country all their lives and they've never seen a frog. And I think to myself, how can you have not seen a frog? But so many, we're probably talking, millions of people. I wouldn't be surprised in the UK that have not seen a frog. And that is something that we've got to get around. That's a massive challenge, I think, for us over here. Aside from all the other bits that we do in the habitat management and the research and all the stuff that we are doing, getting this message across, engaging with people and creating that empathy. And those last slides that Fortunate was showing there, that those gratitude slides, or those gratitude photographs, I just think that is, that is just so special. And really, we need so much more of that. So seeing it happening in South Africa, it's really special to me. And thanks so much for that, Fortunate. I think what we'll do is move on to Nick. If I start sharing, Nick, if you want to try.
Right, evening everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So I'm going to talk about the Black Mambas of Durban. Durban is quite famous for its snakes, famous for its Black Mambas. So I'm going to explain a little bit about it. But just about me. I've grown up in Durban my whole life. When I was a kid, I started watching Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. And when I saw his passion and enthusiasm, he inspired me to work with snakes and reptiles. So I have an interest in all reptiles, amphibians as well, and all wildlife. But snakes is what I focus on. So I do educational work around KwaZulu-Natal, the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm called out to remove snakes in the greater Durban area. And I'll do other little random things at the side. Also, we did a TV series here on DSTV, just in South Africa, hoping to get it online soon. It's just pretty much about the work I do and trying to educate people about snakes and trying to help people realize they're not so scary, because a lot of what people read and see about snakes is always scary. I mean, anaconda has been terrible thing for snakes. Often when I talk, especially like in rural communities, people are they know about anaconda and they think pythons here, because we don't have anacondas here, we have pythons, and people think the pythons here want to eat children and people, but obviously that's not the case. So for those not familiar, this is the Greater Durban area, eThekwini municipality. So this pretty much, I mostly operate in this central area, but I'll go pretty much all over. And you can get different snakes in different areas. So in Durban, we've got a lot of, or around Durban, we've got a few venomous species. The Mozambique spitting cobra is probably the most common highly venomous snake. Puff adders, we get a little bit further to the west. So not so much in Durban really, more in the grassland and farmland kind of areas. Wormslang, they pop up here and there. They also more commonly found further west. And then we get vine snakes, which are pretty common, but you don't always see them because of their camouflage. So we've got a nice diversity. We've got about 20 species or more in the Greater Durban area. So like for someone whose job it is to catch snakes, it's a pretty good place to live. So I'm focusing on the Black Mamba, but I just thought I'd mention the cousin, the Green Mamba. Green Mambas are unfortunately not as common as Black Mambas. I wish they were. They're beautiful snakes. I wish I could see more of them. But they're restricted to the KwaZulu-Natal coastline. And unfortunately, our coastline is very developed, and it's continuously been developed. So Green Mamba habitat is disappearing. So that picture on the right there just shows you, it's a great example. I mean, there's a Green Mamba on a scaffolding at a construction site. That was the third. I've now had 3 Green Mambas at this construction site. So it's just it just shows you like their home has just been destroyed constantly. So, and people here also think Green Mambas are everywhere. So every green snake is a Green Mamba, but that's not the case. As I said, they're quite scarce and only on the coastline. So that's my favorite snake, and the one we're discussing tonight, the Black Mamba. Actually, at first, before I worked with wild ones, I was quite nervous of them. I was pretty scared of them, actually. Not that I wasn't scared in the sense that it would start chasing me out of the bush, but I was pretty scared to catch one and to, it just seemed quite challenging. But I went to work at Dangerous Creatures at Ushaka Marine World, so a little snake park, and there the manager Carl Schlams, he taught me how to work with them, and very quickly I just loved working with them. And when I started doing this full time, which was at the beginning of 2015, I just wanted a Black Mamba call, and eventually I got one, I think in March, and it was really exciting. It was in a storeroom. It was quite a challenging one. And from that catch, I was just hooked. Every time my phone rings, and it can ring 20, 30 times a day, I hope it's a Mamba call every time. So yeah, they're very intelligent, they're powerful. People don't realize how strong they are. Very strong snakes. And they're obviously very impressive. I mean, the average Black Mamba we catch here is between 2.2 and 2.5 meters. So they're big snakes. But yeah, very clever. They are known as being super aggressive snakes. That's what they're famous for. It's probably one of the most famous snakes in the whole world. And yeah, they're known to be highly strung. People think they charge you or chase you. There's quite a few stories of people being chased on bicycles or on horseback. I don't believe it. I've worked with many Black Mambas. I've irritated them. I've done like photo shoots with them where I pull their tail and really annoy them. And I've never had one chase me or really charge me. I've had 1 or 2 turn back at me and tell me to go away. But other than that, they're not an aggressive snake. They're very scared, very shy, very, very nervous of people. And when they see you, all they want to do is get away. It's not an aggressive snake at all. But when they are threatened, like if they're in a corner, they might open their mouth like you see there in those pictures, black mouth, and it's pretty intimidating. They can also spread a narrow cobra-like hood. But not many people that get to see that black mouth like that inside. There's been one or two people that have phoned me and said, yeah, we've seen the black inside. It's actually usually baby mambas, which we don't see many baby mambas, but those small little mambas are very cheeky and they're quick to open their mouth, whereas the big ones are very quick to just move away. So, I mean, I see how black mambas are not aggressive. Like, I see this all the time. So I always have black mambas cornered. Here are some examples. Like that one on the curtain rail, you can see it's just trying to go up. It's just trying to go anywhere, but it's not looking to attack me. That one on the top right, that's in a cupboard. It doesn't know what to do, but no interest in attacking, nor does that one at the bottom. They're just hoping I go away. That's all they want. So they're a very misunderstood snake, and that's why they get killed a lot. So that's why I try and explain to people. So the show we did, Snake Season, that was a lot of it. We were trying to show people, like, you know, we're the ones kind of attacking it, I guess. One, not attacking, but catching. But if you leave them alone, they're not a problem. So sorry for the sideways names and that, but basically these in the Greater Durban area, we've got quite a few little valleys and nature reserves, and this is kind of what it looks like from above. So this is why we have so many snakes, because we've got these nice natural areas apart from that quarry there, that mine, but we've got a lot of homes, a lot of suburban homes surrounding these valleys where there's lots of snakes. There's another one here. So we've got great habitat for snakes here. It's nice for us that like to go for a walk in nature, but I mean, people living on the borders of these reserves, they get a lot of snakes. So this is an example of where the mambas, some of the mambas we've caught. This was a while ago, so there'll be a lot more yellow dots now. But this just shows you, like, kind of where. So most of my calls, you can see, are in this more central Greater Durban area. So area called Westville, Queensborough, Reservoir Hills, it's all around here. And then sometimes you can see we have gone a bit far south or north or west. But that's my focus area. In rural areas, there are a lot of snakes, and previously we didn't get that many calls from there, but we're trying hard to educate people in the communities there, and it's working. As soon as you go to one house, often when I go to a home in a rural area for a snake, the whole community, the word spreads, and they all come to see, and it's good because then they all save your number and they all get called. They all want to call you. So we've been really trying with educational and outreach work, just trying to get the message out there that they don't need to kill snakes, they can just call us rather. But yeah, this is Inanda. This is like the main rural area, or the most snaky rural area in Durban. This is where I get a lot of exciting calls. You can see there's a lot of bush, but there's a lot of people. That's the problem. I mean, wherever there's bush, I mean, it's a small patch. It's just homes everywhere. And believe it or not, there's still quite a lot of pythons living here. So we get quite a few python calls. They're usually eating people's chickens, and a lot of mambas as well. Mozambique spitting cobras too. Yeah, this is just showing you black mambas get into some strange places. Here's one on a curtain rail. This one here, look very confused. This was in the roof of a tin shack, and the snake had actually been going from shack to shack, all these little tin shacks, and the community actually were going to burn down all their homes. So they didn't have much, but whatever they had, they were ready to burn just to get rid of the snake. Luckily, though, someone called, and just as they were lighting the fire, I arrived. And we searched for a while, and then we eventually found it curled up under the plastic roof. This one is in a friend's post box. He actually really likes snakes, and he didn't want me taking it away, but his wife said it must go. She was actually going to get the post, and she said usually she opens and she doesn't even look before she puts her hand in, but on this day she decided to look, and there was this Black Mamba. A couple months after this, at their house they had 3 Black Mambas. It was mating season. They were all around the house all at once, and he left them there. His wife obviously wasn't at home. And then this one was in an elderly lady's bedroom. Yeah, this was in the cupboard. She was sleeping, and she heard something moving next to the bed, and she woke up and saw the snake. And she got up and used her duvet as like a shield, and she held that between her and the snake. And she walked out the room to get her phone, and the snake went into the cupboard and got among her clothes. So yeah, they get into some strange places. Here's a very strange place as well. This one was, as you can see, in the toilet. I've never had this. I had never had this before, and I've never had it again. It was an extremely hot day. It must have been close to 40 degrees, and maybe it was going for a drink. I don't know. Unfortunately, though, the people killed it. Once it was in there, they obviously used something and held it down, held the lid down. They said to me they didn't, but that snake, you can actually see in the picture, it's flattened. But yeah, quite an interesting sight. So Mambas go into homes a lot because most of the homes that they go into border nature reserves. So we don't have Mambas. Generally, we don't have Mambas slithering around the suburbs. They generally go into the homes bordering the bush. But I mean, like sometimes there's rubbish everywhere. And a lot of homes that do border bush like to use the bush as the dumping ground. So in this picture here on the bottom right, you can see for years, probably decades, the bush over the fence is the landfill. People just chuck everything. And that was like a nappy field. Just nappies everywhere. So I have to walk through that because the Mambas will come and lie on the wall, or they just get among the community, and it's a problem. A lot of people keep stuff like this, just wood piles. Wood piles attract snakes, attracts rats as well. I mean, for the snake, it's shelter and food. That's what they're coming for. So like this bedroom on the left, well, I don't know if you can call it a bedroom, but that room, I mean, there were a lot of rats in there. I know because I had to look for a mamba in there. We eventually found it under that little cabinet thing there. It's quite a nice sized mamba as well. That house, I've now caught 5 mambas at their house, but you can see why. So that's what I try and explain to people is you've got to keep your yard neat and tidy. If you want snakes, you can have a mess, but if not, then you've got to keep it neat and tidy. But yeah, sometimes it's easier said than done. A lot of people here like to use repellents. So chemical J's fluid, the drain cleaning chemical, people will pour that around their house once a week because they believe it keeps snakes away, but it doesn't. I mean, a lot of the homes I go to catch a snake inside, the people have been using J's fluid, but I'm there to catch a snake inside. It doesn't work. There's also many different plants people will put around the house. They don't work. Also, when there's a snake scene, people like to burn tires. It doesn't. The only thing that does is make a mess. Doesn't keep snakes away. So there is nothing we can do to keep the snakes away. Sometimes they're also drawn to pets. So I think 2-3 weeks ago, I was called. A guy went to check on his little sister's pet hamster, and instead of a hamster, he found this black mamba. Quite a young snake, about 1.2, 1.3 meters long, so probably 2 years old or so. Needless to say, there was no more hamster. I get a lot of calls for mambas, and well, not a lot, but I get quite a few calls for mambas in bird cages, like where there's bird breeders. Bird breeders, with their setups, they attract a lot of snakes, egg eaters, and then black mambas. So this was a recent one where a black mamba tried to get in to eat the parakeets. Didn't come right, thankfully for the birds. The birds were safe, and the mamba got a bit stuck, but I eventually got it out. The bottom right, I'm sorry if you love cats, I know it's a bit distressing, but this happens a lot. Feral cats will often take up residence in homes, and I've had a lot of calls where black mambas have come in to eat the feral kittens. It happens a lot. So some people welcome feral cats breeding because it keeps snakes away, but if you live where there's black mambas, then it's not going to keep them away. So yeah, it does happen. And then this is a very common animal in the Greater Durban area, the dussie or rock hyrax. I caught one in a convenience store the other day at a petrol station. They get into some weird places as well, but they're often around people's homes, sometimes even go on the roof. And black mambas love eating the young dussies. But I mean, they're so cute. It's nice to have them around. I get a lot of calls for black mambas and ceilings as well, in people's roofs. They love it there. It's warm, it's safe. And I can tell you now, there's a lot of rats up in the ceiling. Whenever I go to a house and I see a rat and I tell the people, they can't believe it. They say, no, there's no rats here. A lot of people deny that they have rats, but it's a waste of time because they probably do. I mean, rats you can't really keep away. But, I mean, so up in the roof, it's heaven for a mamba. Unfortunately for me, it is actually a fun challenge in a way, but it's also really tiring and stressful because you can see it's not easy to move up there. You've got to move around with great difficulty. And when I get a call for a mamba in a roof, it's usually on a 30, 40 degree day. So you've got to go up in there, and it's like twice as hot up there than it is outside. So it's always challenging. But yeah, it's good fun. But again, you'd think me chasing a mamba up there, that the mamba would attack me, and because I'm in its turf, I guess. But that's not the case. I end up chasing them from one side of the roof to the other, and it's hard work. So they just want to get away from me. I often get injured mambas. Sometimes they've been attacked by people, shot or run over. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios. Luckily, I take it to my old workplace, Dangerous Creatures at Ushaka, and the team there look after the patients. The vets work on them, and they've saved a lot. We've lost a lot. It all depends on how badly they've been injured, but it's nice, for me to be able to take it to a top class facility so that the animals can be worked on. Yeah, and they don't charge me, so it's very helpful for me. So I get mamba calls pretty much at any time of year. In summer, I get a lot. It's hot, but a lot of people around Durban get excited for winter because they think there's no snakes. But winter in Durban is it's warm. It's not cold. Or when it is cold, it's not that cold. And it's actually the mating season for black mambas. So I've got a video here. These are two black mambas fighting outside someone's house, as you can see right next to the car. The lady was putting up the washing, and then before she came out, she saw through the window, she saw these two going at it. So when people see this, they often think it's mating mambas, but it's actually two males fighting for a female. It's quite comical in a way, they're wrestling. at this particular call, so I caught those 2. Days before that, I was called for 2 in the neighbor's property. And then between then, I caught 1 in the road above. So there were 5 male mambas there and 1 female. We never got the female. And there was 1 or 2 males that escaped. So yeah, the mating season's winter. So it really kicks off in June. June is the busiest, and then it quietens down. I've had fighting mambas in August, but yeah, then it quietens down. Then around October, November, we start catching gravid, pregnant female mambas. So this was 1 of 2 females that I pulled out of. This was an old septic tank, and they'd covered it up. And I caught 1 female going in there, or just before she got in, I caught her. And then this female was hiding in that pipe. And I believe both were going to lay their eggs there. It wasn't open. I dug it all up. It was a great place to lay eggs. Probably got a bit of moisture from rain. And yeah, I reckon this family would have had, it must have been between 12 and 14 eggs in each clutch. So that family would have had a lot of baby mambas on their hands. But yeah, we caught them. I kept both females until they laid the eggs, and then I released them. Takes the young 2 or 3 months to hatch, and yeah, when they do, I release them as well. After a few photos. So obviously, as soon as they come out the egg, they just as venomous as the parents. So you don't want to get bitten by a baby mamba or an adult mamba. It's the same thing. But yeah, they're very cute. There's a whole bunch of babies, they're newly hatched babies. So the Greater Durban area has almost 4 million people and a lot of mambas. Between myself and other snake catchers, I mean, there's easily well over 100 mambas caught around Durban every year, maybe 150 or more. So you'd think there's a lot of bites, but that's not the case at all. This year, so far, I know of 1 bite. That was a ranger at a reserve. He was doing a patrol during this lockdown COVID crisis. And he was walking, and basically him and the mamba just bumped into each other. And the mamba bit him once on the leg. Luckily, they were able to transport him to hospital very quickly. I think he got there within 20 minutes, half an hour. But he had shown very minor symptoms. But after about an hour or 2, then they kicked in more seriously, and he ended up receiving 10 vials of antivenom, and he was fine. He was back at work a couple of days later. So last year we had about 1 bite. I try and network with doctors at the different hospitals here to try and get an understanding of how many bites are happening. Maybe in rural areas there's bites that are not happening. It could well be. I mean, there's bites that are not being recorded, or I'm not hearing of them. But around Durban, so 1 bite this year. Last year, I think this was the only bite we had. But this man, he discovered the Black Mamba while he was cleaning his bedroom. He moved the bed back, and there was the snake. So, like an elderly guy, he thought he could catch the snake quite easily. So he got a rake and he pinned the head down and he picked it up by the head, but he didn't know how to hold it correctly. So the mamba just turned and got 1 fang into him. That little red dot is where the mamba's fang went in. But he didn't panic at all. He walked down to the bottom of his garden with the mamba in his hand and released it and admired it while it slithered off, and then he called an ambulance. And when I went to see him in hospital, all he could tell me was how beautiful the snake was. And I just, was trying to politely tell him, like, you were very silly. I don't know why you'd pick up a mamba, but, a member of the public should not do that. And then we didn't have, well, I didn't hear of any bites in 2018 or 2017. In 2016, we had 2. One bite was a man who was beating a mamba to death with a stick in his kitchen. While he was hitting the snake turned and bit him. He survived, got to hospital, got antivenom. This lady here, she was very, very lucky. She very nearly died, Mitzi. She walked into a room where she had rabbits, and the mamba, from what I believe, it was right near the doorway, and it nipped her on the ankle, or on the leg. And yeah, she came very close to dying. That's Dr. McEwen with her there. He's a great man. He's saved many people, but I mean, he's very good at snake bites. He's treated me before. He treated my wife. So he's a good friend of ours, and he saved her. It was a close call, but yeah, she made it. And she was far from hospital. Well, it's usually about a 50-minute drive from the hospital there, St. Augustine's, but they got there in like half an hour. So, I mean, it's very interesting because there's so many people and so many mambas, so you'd expect lots of bites, but we're just not seeing that. So it just goes to show you that mambas aren't out here to kill everyone. They're not aggressive. They just try and stay away from people. When I was talking about roofs earlier, I often will go into someone's roof and find signs, like old sheds, that the snake's been living in the roof for months, maybe years, and the people had no idea. So the mambas seem to be able to move around homes a lot of the time without being noticed. I mean, a lot of the time they do get noticed, but I mean, they probably have lots of opportunities to bite people, but they're not. I mean, the 2 examples I gave you there, one was killing the mamba, one guy was trying to catch it. So if people don't do that, they'll be a lot better off. These are the 2 snakes that bite the most people in the greater Durban area every year. Number 1 is the stiletto snake, the Bibrin stiletto snake. It's a very small, innocent-looking snake, as you can see there. The average adult is 30, 40 centimeters. So very small. They're not hooding up like a cobra or gaping like a black mamba. And so people think, oh, it's harmless, and they pick it up. And it's not harmless. They've got a cytotoxic venom which doesn't kill people, but it causes a lot of pain, swelling, and it's just a miserable experience. There's no safe way to handle the snake either, because if you hold it behind the head like any other venomous snake, you can see in this picture here how the fangs pop out the side. So if your fingers are behind the head, you will get bitten, and that happens to a lot of people. But every summer, so right now we're having quite good rain. As soon as it warms up again, these snakes will be active. They'll probably be active during the rain, and we're going to start hearing about bites. And we keep trying to tell people, stop picking up snakes. If you think you know what it is, don't pick it up, because it happens a lot. Sometimes people step on them, but if people just didn't pick up snakes, we'd see a lot less bites. It's the same with the night adder here, the rhombic night adder. This is the most common venomous snake that I get in Durban. So their bites don't kill, but again cause swelling and pain. People often try and catch them themselves. So that's how bites happen, but people will also step on them. But yeah, these are the 2 that bite the most people. I try and work with vets to record how many dogs are being bitten by snakes every year, or how many pets are being spat at by cobras. Fortunately, I have quite a few vets that cooperate nicely with me, and I will often hear when a dog's bitten, or I'll get the call for a mamba, and I get there and I see the dog's been bitten by a snake, so I'm involved from there. It's very, it's not a nice thing to see. It's not nice to witness, but it happens a lot, as you can see here. Well, with mambas, not so much, fortunately, but with other snakes like the night adders, they bite a lot of dogs. Stiletto snakes do. Here's why it happens, basically, or how it happens. So this was a black mamba slithering on someone's like porch area. And let me play this video. This is of the surveillance, obviously. So that, as you see, the dogs go straight for the snake. The snake's not attacking them, but it defends itself. There you saw it. Sorry, it's not nice to see. Maybe I should have warned you. There's far worse videos. This is more of a, this is not such a hectic one. But yeah, it's not nice to see. But this is what happens. The dogs attack the snake does not attack the dog. That's what I try and explain to people. Snake is just trying to defend itself. And you can see once it's bitten the animal, once the animal moves back, the snake goes. I went to that house to try and catch that mamba. The people said the dogs were fine. There's nothing wrong with him. So I was looking and looking. Eventually we couldn't find it. Well, we gave up. And then the dog started vomiting. And that had been over an hour since the bite. So, and then we realized the dog had been bitten. We rushed it to the vets, and it got, I think, 2 or 3 vials of antivenom, and it was fine. So it recovered. So, yeah. Unfortunately, they don't always. I've got another video where it went viral on social media. Decided not to include it. It's a horrible thing to see. These two, sounds like 2 women filming their dog fighting with a mamba in the front yard, and they're doing nothing about it. In this case here, the man heard the commotion, the owner, he ran down, and there's footage of him calling his dogs back. He's just out of the shot there. But that's what responsible pet owners do. If the pet owner spots a snake in the garden, they will call or should call the dogs off or away, and then it's much better outcome. But like in this case, these 2 women were filming the snake and the dog fighting, and they just did nothing. Didn't shout at the dogs, did nothing. It was through a glass door. Obviously, the dog died and the snake died as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not nice. And whenever a dog does die from a mamba bite, it's not good for the mamba's reputation as well. The homeowner, I mean, the dog owner is heartbroken. We've been to calls where there's like 2 or 3 dogs killed. The other day, a lady phoned me. She said the mamba killed the dogs, but she did not care at all about the dogs. She just wanted antivenom to inject her family with, which you obviously can't do. Yeah. But this is what most dogs experience with snakes. They get spat at by the Mozambique spitting cobra. So the spitting cobras are very common in summer, and we get lots of incidents like this. There's not really much one can do with the snake-dog conflict. I mean, if people, as I said, could just try and call their dogs away, but unfortunately, most of the time, the dogs are the ones who find the snake. And then instincts kick in, and But this, thankfully, the dogs don't die. It's extremely painful. I've been spat at before. It's a horrible feeling. And I'll either help the owner, or the owner just does it themselves and rinse the eyes out with water. If they can do that for a while, that should be fine. But when you've got like a pit bull or a Rottweiler, you're not going to hold that dog and hold a hose pipe or bottle of water in its eye and rinse. It just doesn't work. So in those cases, the dog has to be taken to a vet and sedated. But these dogs, 9 times out of 10, make a full recovery.
Nick, just a time ping there.
Pardon?
I said just a time ping. We've got about 15 minutes or so left.
Okay.
For the thing. So yeah, just so that, you're able to watch your clock.
Okay, no, thanks. So in 2016, myself and that guy in the picture there, Dr. Cormac Price, he's from Ireland. He's a very funny guy, makes me laugh a lot. but he's got a great interest in snakes, hence why he doesn't live in his home country. He lives here. He's at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and we decided to start microchipping black mambas. It's the same microchips that are put in dogs and cats. The company that makes them here, Verbac, they sponsor us these microchips, thankfully. And yeah, I mean, the point was to see, well, I was quite keen to try and get an idea of how many mambas are in the two valleys, where we focus on 3 valleys. So that was one thing, to try and get an idea. You'll obviously not know the true number, but to get a vague idea. But I guess the main thing really was to also see movement. So they're not trackers, unfortunately, but whenever we catch a mamba, we now scan it to see if it's got a microchip in it, and it pops up with an ID number. These are the main, well, there's 2 valleys, as I said, but this is the one here, the Mbilo River. So this is Roosfontein Nature Reserve, and it links with a nature reserve called Paradise Valley, and then the Palmeet Nature Reserve in Palmeet Valley. Those are our 2 main microchipping sites. So it's because I live in Westville. So for me, it's quite convenient. We've got the nature reserve on each side. And it's been really interesting. I'll show you some results. This was from a while ago. So it just shows you where the microchip mambas were caught. Not a second time. This is where they initially caught and where they were microchipped. So again, you can see it's all homes, well, for the most part, that are bordering valleys. Like these ones here, there's a small drainage line, a lot of bush going up there and here. So the homes that are not near the bush, they're generally safe with mambas. In June this year, we caught this really big black mamba. It was my biggest one ever. Admittedly, I first incorrectly measured it, but I had some kids helping me. It was 2.95 meters, or so we thought. Then, you can see there, just over a month later, it went straight back, well, almost straight back to where we caught it. And there was another snake catcher that lived down the road, and he caught it in his garden. It was by his front door. And he told a friend of mine about this, what he thought was a 3-meter black mamba. And we hadn't seen a 3-meter black mamba until this one. So my friend took my scan and he scanned it, and I checked the number and I saw it was the snake. So then there were four of us, 4 adults. We measured it and we got it to 3 meters and 5 centimeters. So that was the biggest mamba I've had so far. It was a magnificent beast, that. But yeah, came back. So hopefully it doesn't come back again. We've had quite a few recaptures now, which isn't really the goal, but I thought I'd share anyway. These 2 that were fighting earlier, I told you about. Both of these had been captured before. There's their capture dates. 2017, I think that time frame was the longest we've had a recapture. So it's been interesting to see their movements, and what I can pretty much tell you now is male mambas seem to really return. I don't release them too far away. It's quite a complicated issue because you don't want to take them miles away. You don't want to take all the mambas and put them in one spot. You'll overpopulate the area, and you affect with the balance of nature. So we try not to put them too far away. It's usually around 2.5 k's, maybe a bit more than that. And we've had a lot of males return pretty much to the exact point of capture. So yeah, it's giving us a bit of a dilemma. The females don't seem to return. We've had 1 female recaptured, and I think that was just a chance capture. She wasn't where she was initially caught. So yeah, it's something we're trying to figure out now. What is the best solution to mamba relocation? but yeah, we're still learning. But the microchipping's been a big thing for us. We also, the university is looking at the gene pool of DURBAN'S MAMBAS. So Cormac is getting all the DNA samples together. We've got, I think, about 250 DNA samples now, including that of babies. And yeah, so there's quite a lot going on. DURBAN'S MAMBAS, while they seem to be, to some people, exploding, their numbers are exploding. They're not. There's a lot of threats still. So many black mambas are killed on the roads. Happens all the time. A lot are killed out of fear. This one was at a shopping mall, and a whole crowd gathered, and you can see how many bricks were thrown. I got there just as the mamba was making its last moves. It was, yeah, finished. This mamba here had been hit with a stick, and then they poured boiling water on it. This happens a lot. People like to boil the kettle and then pour that on the snake. I mean, it's really cruel. So, yeah, mambas get killed a lot here. So I don't think the numbers are exploding, but they are healthy. They're very healthy at the moment still. So we do a lot of educational work through either the media, newspapers, now this TV show, and I go out to communities, schools, companies, and I talk to people. I take snakes along. I try and explain to them, you know, I just tell them all about snakes. I try and help people reduce their fears, or I try and help reduce the fear of snakes. But when we had calls for mambas or mamba rescues, it turns out to be a great learning experience for the community there, because a lot of people gather, especially like in the rural areas, as I mentioned, or anywhere. A lot of people see, the neighbors come, and the people see that the mamba didn't attack. A lot of people have seen that. They've seen how the mamba didn't attack me, chase me. It just, we caught it, and you could see the snake was scared. So it's what we try and show them. And yeah, we let them touch the snake. We don't usually let them take pictures and smoke cigarettes like that little kid there. That's not normally the plan, but that happens. Sometimes it gets a bit out of control. I just have to watch the sharp end. It's safe. We've never had a near miss. Just like on a final note, the educational work obviously does work. That's to me, not much else we can do, especially in the area. I mean, the reserves, most of the reserves around Durban are protected areas, but the education's helping. So this black mamba, as you can see, was in a car. When I got there, the guy said to me, "Please don't break anything." And while I broke his dashboard area, you can see like the rest of the car. Not exactly a showroom car. But yeah, I pulled this mamba out and I found these big puncture wounds in it. Then they said to me, sorry, we stabbed it with a spear. But when I started doing this, I did get angry with people, which I quickly learned was not the right thing to do. These guys stabbed the snake with the spear because they thought if they don't kill it, it's going to kill them. That's a very popular belief. So I've learned now, and by being angry with people and saying you're stupid, or, you know, it's not the right way to do it. It just doesn't help the situation whatsoever. It's not going to change their attitude towards snakes. So, yeah, I don't get angry when I see a snake being killed. Well, a part of me does, but I don't show it. And I explained to these guys, like, you can see the snake is suffering. You could see it. This poor snake was in agony. I mean, it had these two gaping holes in it. And they felt really bad. That was the first time I had people feel really bad, like genuinely bad. You could see they were very upset. So I took it off to the vet, and these guys would keep messaging me to see how's the snake doing, how's the snake doing. And the vet stitched it up, but 2 weeks later it died. And these guys were so upset. And they said they're never going to kill another snake. So they haven't called me for a snake at their house, but they've referred me to people. So I've had other rescues through them. So to me, that was a good example of how education is very important, and it's the most important thing, I think. The video of it. But yeah, that's it from me. Peter?
There we go. Nick, thank you so much. It just comes back to the whole people engagement thing, community engagement, working with people and in the right way and sensitively, and getting that message across. And I think it really is. I think social media has made a huge difference. When I left SA, Facebook hadn't started yet. Social media wasn't a thing. I'm trying to think what it was. MySpace or something, I think, was just starting out. And so the kind of engagement that we can have with people today is completely different to just 10 or 15 years ago. So all this kind of engagement, the stuff that Fortunate's talking about, Nick, your involvement, going out, catching these things, speaking to the public and whatever, in an environment such as South Africa, and I imagine it's much the same in many of the other developing countries, and many of the other countries, in fact, that are developed but have significantly venomous species. Getting the right message across is always so important.
Does anybody have a question? I'm just thinking that there's a lot of parallels. The reason I was interested in this was because there's a lot of parallels with what we're having with adders. You know, we have a lot of fuss about people, dogs being bitten with adders and children. And every summer, depressingly, we have these stories, and then there's always a big sort of witch hunt. And I sort of hope in a way we can learn something from each other on that. Not sure what. I mean, this idea of getting people to call their dogs off. I mean, people here kind of say, oh, my dog was bitten by the adder as if it was inevitable almost. It was the adder's fault. The adder was there and now my dog has been bitten. And I don't know if there's a sense of responsibility. I don't know.
Sometimes you just can't avoid it. I mean, like a lot of the time, the homeowner will come home and then they find their dog's dead or bitten, which is obviously horrible. So they're not even there to do anything about it. But I mean, sometimes I get a lot of calls. Even when I go to catch a snake, I have to try and fend off the angry dog. People just, when there's a venomous snake around, and if they know it before their dogs, they need to keep the dogs locked away. It's very important.
Maybe it's because we don't have them in our homes. Perhaps that's what it is. I don't know.
There's a big piece that, the species that we have over here tend to be very focused in terms of the habitat in which they exist, whereas as we see in SA, the shelter, the rubbish that lies around a lot of the areas provides fantastic shelter for the snakes. It's essentially the equivalent of us putting refugia out, but people are leaving these things right around their house. And you know, we go out, we lift up refugia and we find little mice under them and that sort of thing. All that rubbish is collecting and attracting the prey, bringing these things in. It was touched on about the trying to use chemicals and different types of plants and burning rubber and all the stuff that people believe works to keep snakes away. And it doesn't, but it's getting the message across, just keep the environment clean. And the damage as well, the flip side is getting the message across, the damage that pouring these chemicals in the garden and burning tires and whatever it's just polluting the environment. It's actually making things worse. So it's not great from anybody's perspective. See, Fortunate's got his camera back on there as well. Just thinking, Fortunate, with the upcoming season now, the engagement that you're going to be having with the communities and those folk again, is it going to be, are you tackling the same area, the same groups, or are you thinking of trying to, from a frog experience perspective, try and tackle other areas of the country?
So with the upcoming season, the plan is to not go back to where we did the pilot study, but cover as much of South Africa as possible. South Africa has some really remote places, so one thing that I'm using is that website that I showed you to try and collect any names, any knowledge that people have, any cultural knowledge that people have of both frogs and reptiles, just to shorten the distance between them and me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm trying to go to new languages, go to new places. I think so far I've covered most of the Limpopo province, which is 3 new languages that I haven't covered before. So from there, I need to make a plan to go to the coastal areas and cover 3 other languages that I haven't covered before. And hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have covered all 9 languages.
So your own skill set within those languages must be on a significant learning curve.
Yeah, luckily I grew up in a multicultural area, so by the end of high school I could understand 8 of the 9 indigenous languages, and the 9th one I just picked up. I think I picked it up on TV, so I'm still struggling with it. But I can't speak, but I understand pretty well when others speak. And it's always nice when people hear me try to speak their language. Never mind that I might be butchering it at that moment, but they appreciate that I'm trying to speak their language.
Yeah. Excellent. Is anybody pinging something else out there?
No, I think no.
I think those have been 2 fantastically detailed presentations. And I must admit, yeah, from my perspective, thoroughly enjoyed. I think that getting that message out there and hearing something from the old country, it's fantastic. It really warms the heart, and just hearing that there is so much stuff going on that one doesn't hear about every day. Facebook is bombarded with rhino stories and the recent stories about elephants dying in Botswana, and as I say, all the furry and the feathered and the loved. But hearing that there is so much really good stuff going on for the scaly and the slimy is is really good news. So,
well, on that positive note, I'd really like to thank Nick and Fortunate for spending so much time putting together 2 very interesting talks, and absolutely wish you both really well. And if you ever need anything from ARG UK, we're here for you. Thank you both, and good luck with the PhD, Fortunate, as well.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks, Pete.
Thank
Cheers, Nick.
you.
Thank you very much, folks. We'll share the recording as soon as we can.
Okay.
Wonderful to have you with us. Thank you.
And cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers all. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.